Thank you, Sally, and thank you everybody for coming. I'm very honoured and privileged. And a big thank you to Sally and the whole of the AoR, because I think they've been a linchpin in this last nearly a year of pandemic, supporting us along the way. And not only do they keep sending out numerous helpful videos, various emails, but they're actually ploughing through a lot of legislation to make our work safe. And so it's a big thank you to Sally and all her colleagues, because they're a
Lynne, you've muted again. I'm not sure.
Let's just see. Is everybody can hear me now, can they?
Yes.
You did. Oh, great. And did you hear me thanking Sally and the team
at the end?
You did. Great. Yeah. Well, it's a pleasure to see so many faces, and many faces lurking behind the one screen I can see. What I'd like to say is that for some of you, VRT, vertical reflexology, may be quite familiar. To others, it might not. So I thought it would be quite useful to have a bit of a talk, bit of an overview about how VRT developed, how it can be used, because it's not just about standing up. Certainly that's the way it began, but we can use weight-bearing techniques on the hands and feet on small babies who are just standing on a parent's lap. Someone who's in end-of-life care may be lying in a bed, but we can put a book or a tray under their hand and gently press down. And all of the work I have developed over the last 30 years with VRT began with chronically sick older people in a big nursing home complex where I work. And they were the ones who had all my experimentation. They responded well. And so the whole of my repertoire and development of this new sort of weight-bearing technique did not stem from working on fit people or our average client. It stemmed from chronically sick older people, often with multiple pathologies. And it's a very heartwarming thing to say, because it shows that nobody, as well we as reflexologists know, is beyond our help. You can regenerate, and it really is a positive thing to be able to offer. That's VRT within the context of your own sessions. And we're going to talk a little bit with the help of some slides to give you a background. But VRT is working basically on the weight-bearing or semi-weight-bearing hands and feet. And we combine them sometimes, called synergistic work. And often people think, well, if I introduce that into my practice, I'm going to have to extend my appointment time. So if you are a person who offers half an hour treatments or 3/4 of an hour or an hour, it doesn't matter. You do not have to expand your treatment times. You simply slightly condense the work you do on the plantar to incorporate a few minutes while the person either stands or sits, so we can work the weight-bearing reflexes on the dorsum of the feet. And the thing to remember with VRT is that all the reflexes that we know and love on the plantar can be accessed via the dorsum. And I'll show you a chart in a minute. But it makes a lot of sense if we just follow the original Ingham sort of advice, Eunice Ingham in the 30s, when she worked with Joe Shelby Riley, and they put together reflexology as we know it. Although she has most of the reflexes in the body on the plantar, and we obviously have chest, lung, knee, shoulder, but not much on the dorsum. She also has the concept of 5 zones per half of the body. And the body is three-dimensional. The zones are three-dimensional. So why is there a problem with accessing the feet from the dorsum or the plantar? And just a brief outline of how I discovered it, for those who don't know, is I've worked for 27 years in an older person complex for chronically sick people. It's a retirement village. It's got state-of-the-art nursing care, 2 dementia wings, 24-hour nursing, to very nice, comfortable, sheltered housing. So there's a wide range of conditions. And I went there as a reflexologist because I'd gone there privately and helped quite a lot of people soon after I qualified in the early 1990s, and had 1 or 2 great successes, which the medical side of the nursing complex noted. So the head of nursing asked to see me, and I treated her and some others, and I was invited to run a clinic there. And after a year of working, but often having to work the weight-bearing, semi-weight-bearing feet on a wheelchair platform, person had an ulcerated leg or I couldn't lift it up, I sometimes worked the dorsum as the only way to help them. The other thing that came out of that was I became passionate about how useful hand reflexology was, because in my days in training, we only had about half an hour, half a day, or maybe nearly a day, and the whole of the 12, 15 months I trained on hands. Whereas now, I think a lot of people who qualified later have much more realization of the impact of hand reflexology. And so, as well as working people's hands, I began to work on the dorsum, just hoping that I would help them in their half-hour sessions. And to my surprise, when I was very anxious I hadn't given them their fair share of reflexology on the plantar, the next week I found people saying, oh, my bowels have really calmed down since I saw you. Or one lady said, oh, once you worked on my feet, or the shoulder, but of course it was semi-weight bearing on the wheelchair, so I can lift my hand up and brush the back of my hair again, which I haven't done for a year. So I realized that I was obviously helping, especially musculoskeletally, to improve the reflexology response on some people, not everyone, of course. And eventually I worked on someone standing as a first aid, just because she'd been in an accident and I wanted to help her. And her bad hip, where she got numerous problems, actually healed up. She got warmth, she got tingling, and then a day later she could lift it much higher than before her accident. And when I went to see her, I realized that the key, the hidden missing link that I had been working on and beavering away, was actually full weight bearing, just for a few minutes, not for long, because nobody wants their clients to miss out on a lovely, relaxing treatment, reclining, to be standing or seated. So you can really end up condensing VRT into maybe just for 3, 4, 5 minutes at the beginning of a session, and again at the end. And we also introduce a very lovely, very deeply profound rocking, special rocking called diaphragm rocking. And we're going to learn a bit of that on our hands today, which I developed for sleep and jet lag before I even discovered VRT. But it's very useful for pumping energy to where the body needs it. So I developed that and began to share the musculoskeletal side of things, really, with everyone from Tony Porter on his ART classes to colleagues. And within a few months, the word had spread. it spread through faxes and phone calls and letters. It's so long ago, but I was being asked to show more and more reflexologists how this standing technique would work. And I certainly hadn't called it vertical reflex therapy at the time, also known as vertical reflexology. The AoR were the very first people, apart from Tony Porter, to be interested and asked me to speak at one of their annual general meetings. And I'm really glad I didn't the first time I was asked, because I said some newspapers had had treatments from other therapists, not by me, but people I'd taught, just casually, hadn't taught them properly. And a couple of journalists wrote in the Telegraph and places about it was very successful. And I really felt that if I was going to discuss it, I needed to do some research. So I did some research with 2 doctors at the big nursing home complex and the nursing team, just on 8 people. And within 8 older people, and within 2 months, we had 60% improvement in pain, less pain, more mobility. That's after 2 months with no treatment that was maintained. And I worked on them for about 6 weeks, just once a week. So it was a platform. And from then on, I've obviously taught it and written books. But I'm just going to show you a little slideshow, just some slides, and we'll dip in and out a bit. And halfway through, as Sally said, we can have questions. And we're talking about physical tension and stress. And so many of ourselves have felt stress, obviously in our lives, but in the last year for numerous reasons, whether we're working under difficult conditions or not working, and caring for our clients, and of course, great concerns about our families. So little self-help hand techniques that you can share, just show someone, film it on your phone, send a client, send a family member, a little, either perhaps what I show you today, a little weight-bearing technique, or just the diaphragm rocking for sleep. I hope at the end of this session, you'll have a few extra tools that we can just freely share. And in fact, what I will do when we finish this on the Facebook page for this AoR group, I've done a little stress and relaxation video that I can actually put up, so you could share that too if you think it would help. So I'm just going to go into the video screen and share with you I'll be talking you through some slides. So let's just get down here and make sure we've got the right. Let's just get in here to share the screen. Here we are. Okay. So this is the very classical position for vertical reflexology that some of you may have even experienced it. You might have trained with me. We've trained now, over the last 22 years, we've trained over 10,000 reflexologists around the world. So you may well have experienced it somewhere. Basically, the person stands. This is for a photo, but if you were experimenting in your practice or at home, we always advise that you have a chair or table nearby for the person to support themselves. And if there's any balance issues, age issues, health issues, they are seated and have semi-weight bearing treatment. And you'll hear me mention synergistic, and we're going to do a little tiny experiment of synergistic reflexology, not standing, but on ourselves in a minute. So I hope that's something to look forward to. This is a chart, a VRT chart. And if you look carefully, you will obviously see that everything that you know on the plantar, all our old favorites are here. The small intestine, the bowel, the liver, chest, lung, which would be on the dorsum. Extra little points are little like a bracelet around the ankle that I call zonal triggers. And that's a way of linking up. So if you had a shoulder problem, for example, where the cursor is, you could press the shoulder point. This could be also done when someone's reclining. You feel round zone 5 while you hold that shoulder point. You get a tiny pinprick round the ankle, and you hold the two together. And often when you do that, especially weight bearing, it's often like flushing through a pipe or freeing up a whole zone in the body. So it's with VRT, we sort of turn up the power by standing or by connecting reflexes in various ways. And this is just a picture of the dorsal hands. This is a rather lovely room. I have to say, I don't always get the pleasure of teaching in quite such beautiful surroundings. But this was in South Africa at a Steiner school, I think, but beautiful architecture and paintwork. And this is a typical VRT class where people are just standing and practicing and sitting in various ways. And if you can't remain kneeling for long, then you can sit on a little a prayer stool or meditation stool, slip it underneath, or you can sit down and work the weight-bearing hands. There are lots of positions I'll show you in a minute. So you can usually apply what you learn with VRT to the weight-bearing, semi-weight-bearing, or reclining. Reclining is slightly more subtle, but it still helps. This is a picture of my work at a football club, Championship Football Club in Bristol, where I've worked for 16 years as part of the medical team. Not full-time, of course, but working behind the scenes in the week after training and going behind the scenes on home games, on match days, and warming up the players before the big game. Though I have made it to Wembley twice, once when they won a cup and once when they didn't. But I have to say that was very exciting. So this is reflexology and movement, which we won't have much time to talk about today, but I can point you in directions of an article about my work with the football team, which I'll put up on the Facebook page, where I do reflexology and movement. So that's here I'm holding groin point and hip flexor while I gradually rotate the person, not pushing them, but just moving them from side to side, so we can actually get a musculoskeletal release. So weight bearing or semi-weight bearing is the key. Nico Pauly, the medical nerve reflexologist, was very interested in my work as early as 1998, and he came up with the idea why VRT works a little bit better. It's not better than what we do, and all my work is working on reclining people as well for lovely classical treatments, but I bring VRT in. He said that when we have our hands pressed weight bearing or we stand, the anatomical nerves in our feet become sensitized. So therefore, we have reflexes on the feet. They obviously, in an energetic way, send messages to parts of the body. And he said, if those reflexes are sensitized weight bearing, it may give them a little bit more efficacy, a little bit more power sometimes. So it's very versatile. And as I've mentioned, I work with the very chronically sick older people, mainly female, and not mainly, but a majority of female old ladies and older ladies, and then super fit young footballers. And when I speak at conferences about my work with sports injury and maintenance, people often come up and say, oh, how wonderful that you've done all this research on professional elite athletes, fancy discovering this. And I love saying I do work with them and I have developed it, but the everything I teach and everything that's in the books, the 2 books I've written, comes from working on chronically sick older people and seeing that regeneration. And a few months ago, I worked on an 18-year-old player who'd fallen on the pitch with a swollen knee, fluid. The next day or so, I worked on an 83-year-old lady who got a swollen knee, fallen out of bed, and I did the same sort of treatment. So we're going to look a bit later at sleep issues, VRT nail working, where I'm just going to show you a very simple technique that can really help with people who have dementia. And I'm going to put my website address up at the end, because there's a 4-minute training free video on how to do hand reflexology on someone living with dementia. And it's a wonderful thing to share when life is so frightening and you have the very kind therapeutic touch of the hands, and often the feet, if they're touched, would make someone who is very distressed or detached very concerned. But hand reflexology works well. And we look at cramp. So the sleep issues is for relaxation and stress, and the nail working is we look at self-help for cramp and restless legs, and just a little way of freeing up our shoulders. And this is just training people to do a little bit of homework. We always give our clients homework. And here is synergistic reflexology, working the hand and the foot at the same time, semi-weight bearing hand, semi-weight bearing foot, or a hand just placed on a chair. So it's adaptable. You saw the footballer in the changing rooms earlier on when I pointed out the groin and hip flexor. Well, this is how I would normally do the same treatment, never pushing them round. Sometimes with an older person, you may move them a fraction, few centimeters to the right or left, but it may just free up their back enough to be able to reach and pick up the phone, something that we take for granted, and a little wider range of mobility can mean everything to someone who's disabled. So we've got the 7 ways. You can do the basic 5-minute protocol. You have the diaphragm rocking we're going to learn a little bit of. So there are ways of treating people quickly. Shortened VRT is what I offer before various football matches, or sometimes with older people. Ideally, it would be part of your classical treatment. And obviously, you can do hand reflexology with VRT separately or combined. Self-help we'll look at, and then you've got mobilization techniques. So it's very much a mix and match. And if you are interested in what I talk about, you may have a really lovely technique that you are used to using on a client. So you might like to experiment on family or friends at this moment and see how it feels like weight bearing. But the rule is only ever work a reflex when it's weight bearing for 30 to 15 seconds at a time. You just stimulate and hold and release. So little tiny babies can weight bear, and that's simultaneous reflexology. And you can, this is a position for self-help, which is absolutely excellent. But when we teach it, we teach best practice. And so I always say this pose is only suitable for athletes. We can't get our clients wobbling around on chairs, overconfident. But as therapist to therapist, I'm showing you the range of movement from chronically sick old people to tiny babies. And the youngest baby I've treated was 2 days old, and the oldest person was, I think, about 100, 101. So we're going to just try now a little bit of self-help synergistic work, and I'm going to come away from the screen with the picture, but this is where you're going to aim now. If you're sitting comfortably and you're able, with no stretching or distress on a stiff leg, to just pull your foot up and find your adrenal point, that will be great. Otherwise, you can just listen as I talk. So What I'd like you to do, and this is the idea with VRT, which we started off the picture of synergy, where in our case, two reflexes worked simultaneously can achieve more than the sum of those two if they were performed separately. So the synergy of working, in our case, to relax us, the hand and the foot adrenal point at the same time. And some of you will be thinking, oh, how awful, how convoluted, how am I going to do this? Well, I am going to show you, and I hope some of you might be a little surprised by the result. So basically, you're going to find the good old tried and tested. So if you like to just put your foot across your knee and just find that adrenal point. And it might be a little bit bruisey. Some of you may be feeling a bit lethargic and want the adrenaline to go up. Some may be a bit stressed because life under lockdown is pretty stressful. So you might be fine. But if you just feel that, you may find a sensitivity. But you know that when we treat ourselves with reflexology, it's a bit like tickling yourself in a way. It isn't so responsive, it's not so sensitive. So I want you to just find that for a moment so you're aware of what you've done. Keep your foot there if you can. And now, and it's very important, if you put your right foot up, you're going to put your right hand up. And there's a reason for what I'm showing you. So you're going to put your index finger of the foot you've just worked on your thenar muscle. So in there is the adrenal point for the hand. Okay? And it may feel a little bit bruisey. Okay. Now this is the odd bit, and I'm not quite sure how I can, I do sometimes manage this, but when I'm teaching on Zoom, it's a little difficult. What I sometimes do is just try and put my foot up, but I think my screen, I'm in a different room. So basically what you're going to do, you've stimulated your adrenal point, your thumb is free. All you do is keep your finger on the adrenal point, take your thumb down to your foot and work it again. And some of you will be surprised how tender the foot feels, as if someone else is working on it. I can see nods. So some of you might be finding that. And that's the synergistic effect of two adrenal reflex points being worked together, because we're not standing, but we've turned up the power of reflexology. And we always want to balance the body. So if we turn to the other side, so we go to our other foot, you'll be a little surprised, I hope some of you, to find that in my case, my left foot, which I haven't worked at all, is already much more sensitive because you've got the adrenaline either flowing or being sedated, because it's all about balance. And just to completely balance, just find the thenar adrenal point on your other hand, your left hand, if it's the second foot like mine. Down you come. So you've just balanced your body. And this can be really useful if you're stressed, if you're on holiday, if you're working, and you can go into a quiet corner and just do this gently, seated on a chair, just for 30 seconds or so a foot. And you might find that is really helpful to you. And I'm going to ask Sally if there might have been some questions coming in. Before we do that, I've shown you the synergistic point where on our very first slide, where the therapist is kneeling and they're holding the hand reflex and the foot at the same time. We've done synergistic work now on our own feet. And I'm just going to show you a little bit of synergistic work on a baby. In fact, my own little grandchild, Joe. So here am I working on Joe. So let's hope that works. And I'll talk you through a bit of it. It's only for a few seconds. So let's... So I'm working the adrenal point here. And he's just had his bath. And now he's having synergistic work. And that's, then we go on to the diaphragm rocking, very different to how we would work on the feet. But it's really helpful to go back, work the stomach points if a baby is often sick, or if they get digestive issues later and colic, you can work the bowel points synergistically and just teach mothers how to work their babies. There we are. So that's little Joe. And I have to say, I've never been a grandmother before, and I've become a very proud grandmother. So, Sally, have you got questions or anything?
Not as such. First thing I want to say is that baby's so cute. But anyway, then moving on, we've had a couple of comments. So first of all, we had Weymouth Bay Reflexology saying that they just tried the shoulder ankle connection as their shoulder had been awful. Oh my word, instant relief.
Wow.
We then had a comment from Helen Parkhurst, which I do slightly sympathise because I had a slightly similar experience. And they said both points together made me feel a little bit sick, actually. So maybe less pressure next time.
I'll
turn that into a question, actually.
Yes, well, that is a good point. I'm quite surprised, but that it shows it can be powerful. What I think we'll do is I will show you the calming technique that we're going to go on to look at anyway, but we'll do it now. And for anyone who has had a bit of an overreaction, VRT nail working, I tell you what, I'm going to go on to the back to the slides because I want you to get a visual idea of what. Oh, have we still got the baby? I think we might have the baby in the background.
And after you've done that, there's now a few questions. So if we come back to those after.
All right. I'm just looking here in case I... hang on. I'm just going to look and see if I haven't switched the baby off. I haven't switched the baby off for some reason. So let's just go back. And there we are. Okay. So I'll take the questions and I'm just going to get a nail up. There we are. Just to show you, because I'll take the questions after I've shown you this, because if anyone was feeling a little bit queasy or wants some energy, we'll talk about that now so they can fully recover quickly if that was the case. So with nail working, people say, how did it come about? Well, we know bone on bone. Knuckles working on the bony side of the metatarsals, for example, is very useful. It's certainly not my idea. Numerous reflexology practitioners use that. But I thought if bone on bone is so important, so efficacious, what about nail on nail? Because of course on our toenails and thumbnails, we have Ingham's 5 zones on our toe pads. But on VRT, rather, we have to have them on 3-dimensionally on the nail pads. So in the second book, I've worked out all the digestive system, the endocrine, every system of the body has a series of tiny reflexes that we can work individually by, say, pressing a liver point, working it a part of the nail, linking with the liver. But on the whole, and what we do today, and what you can easily practice with, is just have the central pituitary pinch. So whether it's a thumbnail or a toenail, I'd like you to actually look at what I'm doing. I'm going to come out of this again. And very simply, if you want to rest your thumb on your other finger, put your thumb pad on top of the nail. So I'm just seeing if we can do this. Let's see. And then you simply roll your nail forward till it touches. And you're making a very, very deep connection, nail on nail. You can do it one step further, and it's very easy once you will see. Thumbnail facing down, index finger on top. Then your thumbnail on thumbnail, index finger on thumbnail, and you holding this very deep central pituitary, but much more as if it's almost going into the homunculus or the central nervous system. And you're holding like a sort of, not a pulse even, but you're just holding those reflexes in a calming way. So if you were going for an interview on a plane, felt faint, felt sick, something like that, you can hold the nails very discreetly and take a couple of breaths, and it's very energizing. And often if anyone does feel faint or have nausea or anything, it can literally just switch it off. So it's a very calming thing to be able to do. And if a child has a nightmare or someone's distressed, forget about classical reflexology or VRT or anything, just pull the duvet back and you literally can. These are two right feet, which is not what you'd find in bed. But basically, if this is a pair of feet, you would literally just hold nail on nail like that, perhaps for 30 seconds, or in that case, reclining even a minute. And I've used that in end of life care. I've just held the thumbnails or held the toenails and taught relatives how to do something when they feel powerless, just to calm the body down. So it's a wonderful thing to offer. And the last thing on nails is, again, if you take someone else's, you can do it to yourself, you can try now, tapping, literally tapping on the nails like that. If you do work with people living with dementia or have someone within your family, I do urge you to look at the little video on the website, because it shows you just gently how to do almost a hand massage with not vertical reflexology at all, just working so the person really feels calm. But every few passes, you tap on the nails and then you go back to the calming, tap on the nails. And we've had some completely wonderful results with that, of calming people down. Maybe they begin to respond a bit more. It's not the platform to talk about that, but I'll put a link to an article I wrote for the AoR Reflections on working with dementia, if anyone's interested. So, Sally, would you like to ask a few questions or comments?
So this is relating to the nail on nail technique. Would that be good for morning sickness?
Yes, it would be good for any form of nausea. And sometimes if someone's got morning sickness, just holding and almost waiting for the body to almost, like when you expect something to click, something to actually respond, you just hold it and wait for the bodily intelligence to link up to that. But also, and again, there isn't time to discuss it. What you can do, or you could get someone else to do with, you could do it on your feet. If you were very pregnant, you probably couldn't get down there, but you could actually, again, we've only got right feet, but let's say this is the stomach on the left foot, we've got the stomach reflex here. So you would gently work the stomach reflex for nausea while you hold the nail at the same time. So if you're working on someone, a client, you might be, say, working their knee in the classical way, and they say, oh, my knee's tingling, or it's gone warm, things that people often say. And you think, oh, I'm getting somewhere. Let's just give it a little zap. You just carry on working that knee, but you hold nail on nail at the same time for 15 or 30 seconds, just to turn up the power a little bit more.
Thank you. I'm going to go back in time a bit. So is the point of synergistic work to increase the power?
Is the synergistic work, did you say? Yes.
Yes.
When we teach the classes, and I was just discussing with Sally before we came on air, as it were, because I've just putting together the class we teach, the basic and advanced, is finally nearly finished for online. But when we teach the classes, I always demonstrate very early on the synergistic work. We sort of leap ahead in a demonstration just to show what we're working towards, because we do basic classical VRT on the feet, about 10 different very quick moves when someone comes. So we've turned up the power of our client on arrival. We work the whole body very quickly to prime it. They then have their wonderful classical treatment. They have the diaphragm rocking and the lymphatic stimulation we teach in the middle. And at the end, we target 3 points synergistically. So we've turned up the power more. They stand and we link, say, the shoulder on the foot to the shoulder on the hand. And we might say, well, they've got a very bad shoulder, so we'll help the neck as well. So we then synergistically, for the second point, hold the neck point on the foot and raise our hand and hold their neck point. But for the third point, the priority area, we work synergistically, but we link it with a zonal trigger as well. So we will go shoulder, trigger around the ankle, those little bracelets, and then we hold the same shoulder point on the hand, always right hand, right foot. So yes, and the other stuff I've been developing with the reflexology and movement, the nail working, we're just coaxing the body. When I teach, I often say, we reflexologists, with all our wonderful tools from the different classes we've been on, we're coaxing the body just to get that little bit of extra response.
And with the techniques for dementia, it says, can we teach carers these techniques of those looking after family with dementia?
Yes, absolutely. At the St Monica Trust where I work, they have 2 dementia wings, state-of-the-art modern wings for late onset dementia and the earlier dementia. And I have worked with the carers themselves, the nursing staff, to teach them techniques, and also the residents. I've had the residents' families. I've had little groups teaching them basic stuff. And in this article on working with dementia tips, I did for the AoR a few years ago, it actually gives you little hints and protocols. So yes, you can certainly teach people. And it's a wonderful thing with reflexology or hand reflexology. When we're with someone who has dementia and they say it's the long goodbye, and my father had dementia and he, in the end, couldn't speak, but I could always work his hands and massage them and just talk to him and make a contact, because human touch is so important and it's so familiar. And often people in care homes are touched therapeutically but they don't have that more softened massage touch that we can give within the reflexology framework. And obviously, people in care homes have wonderful care, and most of them, or many of them, have loving relatives who often like to find something to do when they're there. So it's a gift, really, to give to your clients if they have a member of family in a care home.
Just a couple of more, and then I think we can move on. The knee injury to the 18-year-old and the 83-year-old, did they both respond?
Yes, it's a bit of a joke, and I'm afraid I do tell it rather often on my classes, because the lady, her fluid went down quicker than the young man's. It wasn't, I mean, they'd got different conditions and all the rest. You don't compare like for like, but it did amuse me at the time that her knee became quite hot and red, and by the time I left, some of the fluid had begun to drain. So they had a similar treatment. They would have been standing first. I would have linked up the synergistic work, certainly used nail on nail. And in the young man's case, certainly reflexology and movement, holding knee reflexes on his hands and nail working and getting him to just move his injured leg gently back and forward, obviously within the framework of all the medical team I work with. And sometimes people say to me, does this really work? And I say, well, football can be a pretty ruthless game for aiming for the top. And nobody would have had a reflexologist working with hundreds of players over 16 years if it didn't work, because they are elite athletes just wanting the best. And I love giving sometimes, not always, and not all the players want it, but giving sports people, whether they're older tennis players I've worked with, lots of rugby players, they're all looking for that extra 1 or 2%, which is in the difference between winning or losing or scoring a goal. And that's where we as reflexologists can complement all the allopathic medicine in the big state-of-the-art medical training rooms at the football club by just adding something extra. And we work alongside them. Or I do. There's only one reflexologist there, but I've taught other reflexologists who work with sports teams.
And I think this probably follows on. Could this help with arthritic pain?
Yes. When we did the original observational study in 1998 at the nursing home, many of the residents, even ones who weren't part of this study, had arthritis, and it was key. But we decided between the two doctors and the head of nursing, we wouldn't name an ailment or condition. We just said we were looking for an increase in mobility and a decrease in pain. And this is anecdotal, but over the years at the nursing home, and that's a jolly long time, 27 years, there must have been some form of regeneration in arthritic limbs or whatever, because people began moving better and they maintained that. But I have to be very careful when I say arthritis. I would just say reflexology and VRT can sometimes help joint issues, because we have to be so careful now as reflexologists. So I would never say it helps arthritis. I'd say some clients, some residents with arthritis have found relief, especially if I give them little self-help on their hands. So if someone has a bad shoulder neck problem at night and they know by pressing down or putting their hand on a book before they go to bed, that's a way to help them.
So you still have a few questions coming in, but do you want to finish your presentation? Then those people that need to leave can leave and we can mop up the questions.
Okay. Yes, perhaps I'll just finish, just so there might be 1 or 2 things that people might be interested in. There's not many more slides.
So there is, what do you do for cramp?
There, I will show you now. Here we are, instant. We didn't even rehearse that, did we, Sally? What we do for cramp is weight bearing. Now we know good old Ingham and her referral areas, which I'm a great fan of Ingham's referral areas, because if my footballers twist their ankle on the pitch, I've taught them to grab their wrist and rotate it hard to free up the ankle. And the same way for cramp, you can show, it could be this is a footballer who gets cramp sitting on the substitute bench in the cold weather. But this could be an older lady or man who gets cramp in bed, and they are gripping the upper part of the lower arm, as it were, under the elbow in a weight-bearing way, working round quite quickly to just release cramp if it happens, or do it before they go to bed to stop it happening. So it can work in two ways. If you're actually working the arm in the similar way for restless legs, instead of going round the equivalent of the calf, you slide your fingers down as if you're stripping the muscles weight bearing, and that can really seem to help restless legs. So you've got two ways of working, but using weight bearing, again, as I said, is turning up the power. That's a close-up of nail on nail, which I was showing you. This is a dementia slide, which is incredibly touching. This lady in late stages of dementia took my hands just before Christmas and started giving me hand reflexology. And she'd watched me, and it was so I wrote a piece about it. I wrote a little blog about it on my website if you want to read up. And she gave me this wonderful Christmas gift. And the fact that in her very vacant state, when she'd stopped talking, she had watched what I'd done enough to do proper reflex moves up and down my hands. And I thanked her for it. And she always used to stare vacantly ahead. And I thanked her, and she lifted her head and looked me straight in the eye and gave me the most beautiful smile. And so she was aware exactly of what she was doing. So that's a very special photo for me. And I asked a carer to take the picture. We think we'll finish on this diaphragm rocking. These are everyone can learn. Oh, this is just a bit of a joke. I taught Dwight Byers of the International Institute in 2003. He came and signed up for my course. And I never thought I'd have Dwight Byers on his knees telling him what to do, but that was a one-off. So it's universal. You can work on anyone at any position, and it's subtle if you are reclining with the client. I just thought if anyone was interested and wanted the DVD, just for the members, if you go to the website, you don't have to, of course, and I'll put lots of free little things up on the Facebook page. But if you do order in the next day or two, the DVD is cheaper, and that's the link. So if you want to make a note of that, and I'll just show you the diaphragm rocking before the end of this talk. Oh, and the books are they're printed in different languages, but it is rather amusing to know it's in Estonian and Russian and Portuguese for Brazil and Dutch and Japanese, but not actually in French or Spanish. But anyway, I'm very pleased it is there. So let's just go back to that. And the thing I want to show you last, and then if people want to ask questions, I'll be very happy. If we look at sleep, and this is sleep, but it's also for releasing tension. On the feet with diaphragm rocking, as I said, we're pumping energy back and forward. This is a reclining VRT technique. So it's not weight bearing, but it's part of the repertoire. With hand reflexology, we can take our thumb and we put it between the second and middle finger. Pressing, so we're really on the diaphragm. And then you're not going up and down, but you are rocking slowly. So your fingers are almost curling over the top of the metatarsals. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. And if you go to bed and you can't sleep, you don't have to think good thoughts. It's nice if you can, but often they're worrying thoughts. If you just mechanically rock your hands, perhaps 15, 20 times a hand before you go to sleep, or when you wake up in the night and do it again, you may find you drop into quite a deep sleep. And I've done this when I've been traveling and speaking at a conference and are jet lagged and think, oh, how can I be bright the next day, and rock my hands thinking I'll never get to sleep, and the next minute the alarm's ringing. So it is useful. It's useful for people who perhaps only can't sleep when they travel, or babies. It's also very good for just feeling run down. So it will pump energy, or it will give you energy in a wider sense than the sleep protocol, energize your body where it needs it. So simple rocking like that. And as I showed you on the slide, little children like to do it. And I shared it with a little girl who was having a panic attack because she'd had an asthma attack on a plane when I was flying back from teaching in France. And she was screaming and went blue, and they were trying to hold her down. And I said to the mother, could I show the mother? I didn't want to show, interfere with the child's distress, but I said to the mother, could I just show you this rocking, and perhaps you could show your child? And it actually calmed the mother down, not surprisingly. And then I leant forward because the child was in front of me, and she turned around and I rocked her hands, and she completely calmed down, and she landed without the usual panic that happened whenever she landed, and it was combined with an asthma attack. And it was quite a wonderful transformation. And a lot of reflexologists have anecdotes and stories about how this very simple technique has had such a profound calming effect. So I just hope that's a little positive thing to end on, that you might be able to share with someone along the way.
Absolutely. And actually, I'm going to ask Alison, are you still here? Because you can share your anecdote about the diaphragm rocking as well. If you are, can you unmute?
Oh, hi. I'm sorry.
Hi, Alison.
Hello. I'm sorry I can't put my camera on, but I look absolutely terrible. I need a hairdresser.
Oh, don't we all?
I work in a nursing home, obviously not at the moment, but as a massage therapist, actually, rather than reflexology. And there was one day, there was a lady there who was, she had dementia, and she was very, very agitated, and the carer was having a bit of a job to try and calm her. She kept jumping out of her chair, and the carer really wanted her to sit back down because she was unsteady. And I bought your books quite a few years ago, Lynn, and I'd learnt the diaphragm rocking technique, and I used that on this lady, and she stayed in her chair and slowly just closed her eyes and went to sleep. And the carer, who had been trying to calm her down, she couldn't believe her eyes. So I made sure I taught it to her so that she could perhaps use it if the situation arose again.
Gosh, well, thank you for sharing that, Alison. It's so heartwarming for me to hear how things spread through the books or word of mouth. So well done. Thank you.
Right, I'm going to go back in time a bit. Mandy Spur, are you still here to ask your question? If you can unmute yourself if you're still here.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
Hi, thank you. Yes, I was just intrigued by the ankle bracelet points that were mentioned early on in the talk, and I just wondered when linking those little points on the ankle bracelet, how do you know which point, so many of them around the ankle, how do you know which point on the ankle bracelet to link your techniques to?
Right. The question is, the ankle, little ankle, I'll use this other foot, it's easier. The ankle bracelet, if you like, I've called them zonal triggers because I wouldn't say, if I was showing you now, this is a zonal trigger for the kidney, this is for the shoulder or whatever. But my idea with the zonal triggers, in a nutshell, is that the triggers are managed by the zone. They're triggered by connecting. So you would never say, I'm working a zonal trigger here. You would have to say, I have touched the knee. This is what, oh, hang on. I'm just going to have to, something's popped up on my screen. There we are. Now I can see again. Let's say you find a knee point. You will be guided, and we do have to teach this properly, so this is in a nutshell. You would hold the knee point where you work round in roughly zone 4 and 5 till you find a tiny pinprick. And those of you who've learnt VRT with me, and I know can see names that have, you'll know that when you find that point, it's quite either a dull ache or a little sensitive pinprick. Then you hold the two together, then you go to the knee on the hand, and at that point sometimes someone's shoulder will free up quite a lot. And that was one of the slight problems with VRT in the early stages, a nice problem to have, but it was that people would be saying, oh, this is so wonderful. I had a frozen shoulder and it's freed up, which it had. And 2 journalists wrote about it in national newspapers. But it gives, I always play things down because I think it's much better to have a client agreeably surprised with what you do than hear of something that can sometimes look a bit like magic. And I do feel quite pleased sometimes at conferences if I say, has anyone got a stiff arm or a stiff knee? And we do just what I've described, and it frees up quite a lot. Of course, it's lovely because it means reflexologists can gain new tools quickly. But on the whole, it's a way of freeing up the zones, and it may not be quick, but if you do experiment, musculoskeletal issues certainly respond often very quickly.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Barbie White, are you still with us? If so, can you unmute and ask your question?
Hi, Lynne. I think I've forgotten my question. I think it was, how long would you work with babies, and would you only use 2 or 3 points?
When I work with babies, and many years ago, 2 Bristol GPs used to send me mothers and babies with colic or feeding problems just to teach the parents what to do. So I would work the whole foot very, very gently in a brushing movement. I really say when I teach, although mothers and parents and carers do work the toes of babies, but I tend to say for this sort of training, avoid the toes, work up and down. If you've got a tiny little foot, you brush up and down the spine. There's a little video about crying babies, a little free one on my website you could have a look at. So often it might be 5-10 minutes. That little video clip of Joe, he really liked that treatment and was happy there for 10 minutes. It's quite short, quite targeted. And the rocking that we do, the diaphragm rocking, you might remember you saw me on little Joe doing an almost scissor action where I just flipped the little tiny toes back and forwards. But if you work the spine, cradle round the feet, sometimes get a tiny little bit of baby cream and work, and obviously working around the adrenals to calm them, the digestive area and the bowel area. So it's really spine, adrenal, and the digestive and bowel. It's all digestive, but digestive being stomach and then bowel being processing through.
Thank you very much.
Short and sweet with babies.
The next question is Verity. Is Verity still with us?
Yes, hello.
Hello, do you want to ask your question?
Hi, I just wondered if there was a technique that you could use to help stroke patients who may have a dead arm or a clawed fist.
If anyone has a dead arm or a clawed fist, I don't have a specific treatment, but I know from all the work I've done with sports, and that not only elite, it's, you know, a young lad playing rugby or whatever, a schoolboy, always look at the referral area. So if it's a clawed hand, which would be very difficult to work, I will go to the, if it's a clawed right hand, I'll go to the right foot and I'll try and tease it out, and I'll work, and as if I was almost unraveling the clawed hand or a very tight arm. And it's like, if you, as we were talking earlier, if you get cramp in your arm, your leg, and it's unbearable, then it's so much easier to grab really firmly round your top of your lower arm below the elbow, which is the calf equivalent. So I think all I would say to you is really refer to, look at the referral areas as a first step, but always work the central nervous system on the hands and the feet, because obviously we are, you know, the bowel, our guts are what is the core of our being and our toxicity, in the sense of naturopaths look at the gut before they do anything else. And the central nervous system is what connects us to the brain. So I always work the spine. I would work the gut a little bit, but not particularly in your question, but referral areas would be what I'd suggest for you.
Okay, thank you.
So we're now beginning to get, I mean, it's 4:10. We're beginning to get lots of questions about every condition you can ever imagine.
Yeah.
I think if we can, I think we need to sort of start to draw this to a close. As we are looking at stress and tension, Lynne, do you have time for just one more?
Yes.
Sort of, what would you suggest for headaches and migraines?
Right. What I would suggest is is the pituitary pinch, perhaps in a little sequence, if you like. So again, hold for neck and head, holding, we can do weight bearing, of course. And if I just get a book here, and you've got a headache, press your hand down on a table and work the spine and the neck just for a minute, but also grab the base of the thumb. And this is part, you know, I was telling you about reflexology and movement, and this is where I showed you on the footballer and the older man, where I held the groin and hip flexor and then I move the body slightly, very slightly. We're not manipulating. Here, for the neck and head, I'm holding the thumb, but I'm rocking the thumb back and forward, back and forward. You want to, for migraine, you'd want to do the nail on nail because it's hormonal in many, many cases, and you're holding this pituitary pinch. The other thing you can do, if let's say neck and shoulders, and this is just touching on the whole nail working we teach on the reflexology and movement course. So it's really quite difficult to show you something and can't follow it through. But basically, one of the very extra steps I've found with nail working, and we'll use it as the shoulder illustration, if bone on bone is so important, as I said, nail on nail is. But if we're treating ourselves, we can't hold two nails on that. We haven't got two hands. So if you were freeing up your shoulder here, and you can't hold the nail at the same time, like I've told you how to hold it for your client, But what about tooth and nail? Very, very light. And what I will say about the nail on nail and tooth and nail, which I didn't touch on, and there isn't really time at all, is just to say that 3 years ago, I did a project with London University on mobility, and this is freeing up neck, shoulder. There was one particular technique I used, which I've just described now, but not the player holding his tooth on nail. We didn't go into that, but we used nail. It's a great honour for reflexology. London University, the club doctor at the time at the football club, was so interested in what was happening, he put a recommendation, because he taught there, to the ethics board of Queen Mary University in London for a fourth-year medics who are doing sports science to see about them studying reflexology effects on footballers and maintaining and looking at groin movements, psoas, sciatic stretch. And we did a project over many months with a fourth-year trainee doctor. And though it was not the number of people we treated were like 20, they did say at the conclusion, there was a positive conclusion to the research stating that a trend towards a greater effect in the intervention group, which was VRT and reflexology, the VRT combination, suggests that further reflex would be justified. And to be studying at that level of medic, a London University fourth-year medic, spending a year doing a dissertation on reflexology, movement and VRT to see how it would help maintenance, increasing flexibility is quite something. So it's a stepping stone.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, I have to say, sorry to those that we haven't answered the questions to, but Lynne, we could have had you here all day and still had questions coming in, I think. But do remember that Lynne has got free resources on her website. She's going to put something in the Facebook community, books, videos, CPD courses, soon to be online CPD courses. So, you've got places to go for your questions as well. But I think we all want to say a huge thank you, Lynne. You have been so generous in what you have shared, and it's been fascinating. I mean, that hour has just flown by. So thank you all. And you can see in the chat all the thanks from everybody else.
Oh, well, thank you all for coming. It's really a pleasure. And it's so nice to be, for me, part of the reflexology community. And I joined the AoR in 1991 as a student member, which makes me very old. But it's lovely to be with you. And thanks again for giving up your time. Wonderful. Take care.
Thank you. So do you just want to wait till the end, Lynne?
Yes, I'm happy to wait.
So yes, if you can all end your call and then we'll...
Bye-bye, everybody. Take care.
See you soon.
Bye.